Hello and welcome to this 15-minute webinar, part of the series 3 Key Ingredients for a Successful Food and Beverage Supply Chain Today. I'm very pleased to welcome Steve Dombroski, Director of Consumer Markets at QID, and Ludovic Lezenven, Principal Business Consultant at QID DynaSys. Hi gentlemen, how are you doing today?
Doing well.
Fine, Dorothy.
Great. So topic of today is collaboration, which is the first ingredient to succeed. So Steve and Ludovic, I have two main questions for you today. What are the main limits of collaboration within any supply chain, and how flexible can an extended supply chain be?
Well, I'll actually start with that first question, Dorothy, and thanks for having us today. Ludovic and I appreciate to talk about this very important subject. You know, when you speak about supply chains, and I've been actually asking this question to myself lately, especially with all the disruptions that we've had through COVID-19. You know, is it really a chain? Each link represents a piece of this puzzle, but there are pieces within those pieces. So if you look at, let's say, a supply chain, there's 3 links. You have suppliers, your internal, and your customers. But within each of those, there's a supply chain in itself. You may have an organization, for example, let's say you have a company who makes candy, confections, and chocolate. Let's say they have multiple manufacturing facilities and they use a network of contract manufacturers as well. Well, that's a supply chain within the manufacturing organization. Their distribution network is another supply chain in itself in that link. And then if you talk about suppliers, let's think about what their suppliers give them. Packaging materials, they give the actual candy, maybe raw materials, sugar, certain flavorings, the actual chocolate or cocoa themselves. And what about that cocoa? Where does that come from? You go all the way back to the harvesting of the different cocoa producing countries. So there's another big supply chain. So there's a lot of pieces, and it's a living thing. It's not static, it's not stagnant. So it has to be managed. It has to be cultivated. It almost has to be blended together, just like you would a fine food item that has ingredients. So why not the supply chain? Why doesn't your supply chain need ingredients to work? And in conversations, Ludovic and I have been talking, and you know, if we were going to treat the supply chain almost like a recipe, what ingredients would you need? And we came up with 3 of them, and today we're going to talk about the first one. So the ones we came up with are collaboration, investigation, and evaluation. So let's start with collaboration. What do we mean by collaboration? Well, I always laugh. You know, the other day I was texting somebody, and finally I got tired of texting, so I picked up the phone and I called them, and they said, "Why are you calling me?" I said, "Because we're having a conversation. I want to have a conversation about this." And they said, "We are." I said, "No, we were texting." I said, and things get lost in translation. Let's just face to face. Let's talk for 2 minutes. We'll save a lot of time. We'll get to the point. We'll get the issue resolved. And what do you think? And they were actually stunned. They're like, "Really? We can do that?" Yes. Why keep a secret? Just talk, just collaborate, just communicate. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and what we want to talk about today in terms of talking through your supply chain and communicating. You know, it's not just about the internal walls within a manufacturing organization. It's about all your trading partners. It's about all pieces. So for example, let's look at the back end of the supply chain first. So the very end, the consumer. If you talk about food and beverage, and I mentioned a candy company, that manufacturer has to own that product all the way till the consumer consumes it, because their name is on it. So even though they may not be at the final piece of the sale of it or the distribution piece, it still has their name on it. So they need to communicate all the way to the consumer for their taste, their preferences. Did they like it? Did they like the price? Maybe the retailer is selling too much. That's all information that needs to be shared. Talk to the suppliers, the consumers and the customers. Talk to them. Why keep a secret? Find out what your customers are doing. Promotions today are such a huge part of the business. Talk to your consumers and your customers. Find out what they're selling. Find out if they're discounting your product so you can make sure it's the right place at the right time. There's a lot of information that needs to be shared. Now, internally, within your own manufacturing operations, again, it could be very complex. Let's talk about this fictitious chocolate company. Let's say they have 5 plants and they have 3 co-packers, and they have to determine who's going to make what and when. Well, what do you need to make that work? Collaboration. Why keep a secret? Why not share information when you have it? If you're hiring a co-packer, see far in advance when they're going to have time available. Maybe you're a seasonal product. Chocolate, candy, confections, it's very seasonally oriented products. So you need to have that information, and the only way to get it is collaborating. Again, why keep it secret? And finally, let's talk about those suppliers. Suppliers, they're the top of that supply chain. They're the start of the river. They're the start of the stream. If you don't get those ingredients on time, your packaging materials, especially when you're talking about something like cocoa that has to be a grown item, comes from only certain regions of the country, again, you need information. You have to collaborate. What if you're changing products? What if you're changing designs? What if you're changing packaging? Again, you have to collaborate. That communication between each of those levels, separately and together, because you have to remember there's 2 supply chains here. There's the physical, which is the actual products and the ingredients and all the materials, but there's the information and the data. That data supply chain has to be in sync with the physical supply chain. So again, Ludovic, why keep it secret? Why not share that information? And you do that through processes and systems. So I kind of covered the process. So Ludovic, tell me about the systems. How do we do that with systems?
Yes, thanks a lot, Steve, for those insights. Really interesting. And it's true that today, modern supply chain require much more than just the limit of what we have seen previously in the past, just data about volume, about what are you going to make, to sell, to move, or to buy. Today, there is much more information and valuable information in real-time intelligence of any stakeholders, either the ones that are internal to the organization, as you were mentioning, between different plants and so on, but either from outside of the company in customer side or supplier side. So that those communication and information that are, let's say, qualitative information are really important to react and to be effective in a real supply chain today. Let's talk, for example, as the example of this chocolate manufacturer. A few times ago, one of their plants were on fire, and it has completely destroyed this plant and the products that it was really making. So it was a big problem for this company to react. But obviously, and that's thanks to our capacity to simulate and to give them information in time to any stakeholder in the organization, they were able to reallocate all the effective inventories they've got everywhere else in Europe to the right demand, to serve the demand and not lose any sales, so keep the revenue on top. On the same way, they were able internally to speak between each plant who were still alive to reallocate the production of the plant that were not able to produce anymore. So that was done in a few weeks. And this reaction is not possible if you have not the possibility to communicate efficiently information between any stakeholders. In this case, internally, that was really critical for the business. And in fact, they achieved to do it in few weeks, and that was quite impressive. But it's not just internal, you're right, and communication, collaboration need to be also external. Customers and suppliers are critical for any organization. Of course, if we look at that, it's because we know that if the information of customers are not taken into account enough in advance, a supplier or manufacturer will not be able to speak in advance with his supplier and take the right decision. So it's really critical to have all those information on time and to communicate, to speak, to have way to give information to all the chains we see here. If I take a negative case, compared to what we live in the chocolate manufacturer company, I had an example of a company who is a food industry manufacturer with an appetizer product, and they They are worldwide, in fact, and they had a big issue once in a period. They discover that by a normal way of messaging, that the quantities they have sold the period before was tremendous. Everybody in the company were very surprised by these sales. It has completely void the stock everywhere in Europe, and somewhere in other place in the world. And it generates a lot of shortages, even in the shelves of certain big retailers in Europe. And all those sales was just due because of lack of communication with one of the main retailers they've got, who has opened new doors and new chains in his organization. This lack of communication had a very negative effect, as I was mentioning, less revenue, penalties from the retailers because of shortages, even let's say a lot of operational costs that come behind this to raise the new level of capacity required to serve all the new business that has opened. So this lack of reaction to new opportunity is clearly the image of a lack of communication and a lack of collaboration with customers. But how to avoid this? And that's why QAD DynaSys is there. QAD DynaSys R&D has, in relation with its customers, worked a lot around creating objects to be able to create social collaboration, serving the full range of S&OP stakeholders, but also external to the company customers and suppliers. Those objects of social collaboration are linked together in what we call a planning process control to manage risk and opportunity into the tool, to be able to get that into the topic of supply chain and to get in advance information to take the right decision in terms of manufacturing, supplying, and serving the customer behind this. So all those tasks, opportunity and risk, are really important in activating alerts, reminders to anyone, just not through emails, but also through more phone apps application, to be able to communicate to other ones information as quickly as possible. And of course, as you mentioned, Steve, why not take your phone and call the guy to answer the questions? That's also important. So why keep a secret? That's my question today, Dorothy.
Thank you, Steve and Ludovic. So stop keeping secrets, and many thanks to all of you who have attended this first webinar of the series. For any questions you will have, please feel free to add them in the short survey that will automatically appear in a minute. We will be sure to answer you very quickly. Ludovic, if you want to move to the next slide, please, to the last slide.
Sorry.
So let's go ahead for the second mini webinar of this series on June 24th, same time. We will discuss the second key ingredient for a successful food and beverage supply chain, which is investigation. Take care and have a great day. Bye.